A question has been asked. How am I doing? You're more
Eddie,
up
how
on
is
it
he
than I
doing?
am. Huh?
Besides being mean and ornery, how is he doing, Betty?
I don't know. Pretty much the same.
Would she come on screen with you?
She's shaking her head negatively.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good boy.
we have to respect that.
Why?
We're gentlemen, George.
Somebody does, George.
Yeah.
Somebody has to respect
Tell him thank you.
She says thank you.
it. You're welcome, Betty.
We can hear her. Maybe she can tell us. Oh, pretty much the same, huh?
Well, I don't think that's the true answer.
Well, what is the true answer?
Well, all these phone calls you've been having with doctors.
Oh, in that sense, I thought they meant how are you
Feeling?
doing in terms of your
Huh.
everyday connectivity.
Are you on the upswing, George?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think so, but I don't know that I'm on the downswing.
Talk
Oh, good.
about appetite and sleep, George. Appetite and sleep.
I have a great deal of, no, I don't have any appetite to speak of, but I'm plenty sleepy. Hi, Gary. So Betty, what's
Gary.
going on with
Hi, Gary.
the doctors?
I don't know. I mean, in terms of your treatment, I don't know when that starts. I thought it was gonna start this week.
That's the chemotherapy.
Right.
Okay.
The immunotherapy plus the chemo. I thought that was gonna start this week, but it didn't, obviously. In the meantime, they wanted us to revisit surgery. And so I have put in a couple of calls to the surgeon's office. And they have just responded today to you. And I don't know what they said to you.
They said they want another PET scan
You said cat.
or cat. I'm not sure which.
On Monday,
I
they
mean,
said, right?
because cats are pets, you
On
see.
Monday, right?
Uh,
You're waiting a
no,
call.
she's gonna call me back and tell me when.
I thought she said Monday, but they were gonna call you to schedule like a time or something. Anyway,
Beats me.
so my guess is that's either to measure the tumor for the surgeon, which means the surgeon is gonna give a look at it, I guess, and see if it's gotten bigger or whatever, or if it's still contained in the liver, I assume. So that's a promising sign of perhaps he's gonna take another look at it. And that's what your oncologists and your primary are pushing for. So,
Yeah, after explaining to us on Friday afternoon why I couldn't have surgery, but I have to have chemotherapy. And I guess they hung up from that and said, wait a minute, that's not truly convincing. And started calling the surgeon again. Unbeknownst to me till yesterday. But I'm all for it. If they can excise the thing, then I don't have cancer anymore, I guess. And
That's
that would
great.
be- yeah, that would be good. And who was it? Daniel Chavira said you only need what, 10% of your liver?
Yeah, you were told that you could live comfortably with 15%. And when I told him that, he said, you can live with a lot less. And, have a
Maybe
good...
not so comfortably.
Yeah, I have
Welcome,
no
Norm.
idea.
Hello.
And George Crook, you got a haircut.
I did. Finally.
Wow.
Got a whole
Should've
of
seen
hairs.
You should have seen the
Email
pile
has
on the floor. It
disappeared
was
from the
phenomenal.
Is there
So I
any
have to use
left?
this laptop.
oh, so I won't be.
No, you won't be able. Can you guys hear me any better?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Okay.
Much
Okay.
better.
I put the headphone in.
Y'all have a good time.
Okay.
We're gonna walk.
Is Amos staying with me? You gonna stay with
No,
me?
he's coming with
Okay.
you.
They're going for a walk.
Gonna go for a walk?
Now, do you guys mind if I eat Girl Scout cookies during our session? I've got some
I'm eating birthday pastries.
peanut butter Girl Scout cookies that we bought over at Lowe's last week, and I totally forgot that I had them. And they are like, oh, if you have them in the house, they don't last long. They really don't.
Well, these have.
You just reminded me, I'm gonna go get a double chocolate cookie.
Yeah, only if you share them, Tim.
Okay, this is for you. So where's Frank
Okay.
Daly? Do we know where Frank Daly is?
Did I get something from him? I know I got something from Bob Charpentier that he probably will not make it because he'll be driving back to Bedford. Daily.
Was Frank, I missed the last two sessions. Was he out of the hospital finally or
He's been
Yeah.
in and out.
in and out?
No, I don't have anything.
Well, let me
from-
text him. Let me text him.
It looks like he's getting very good care from Megan. She's been on camera with us a couple times. Daughter Megan.
That's his daughter?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So George, betwixt and between, aren't you? I've not been able to follow all the ups and downs.
Neither does George.
George has followed all the ups and downs either.
Which George are we addressing there? Crook or Ferry? Huh?
I think Crook, right, Gary?
Yes, I was asking George Crook.
Oh, yeah, I can't follow him either, Gary. As of Thursday night or Friday night of last week, it was chemotherapy. I'm too weak to have a liver amputation, whatever you would call that. And then they immediately went to work deciding if I could have my liver excised. So I don't understand it entirely, but I think of the two evils of protracted chemotherapy and, missing most of a liver, I prefer the latter, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, you'd rather get it out of your body if you can.
Yeah,
I would think so.
yeah, then I'll be cancer-free.
Just as good as
That's a
new.
lot more traumatic to your body than the chemo, isn't it, George? And
I would
radiation.
imagine it has to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a major organ, it's your biggest interior organ.
Yeah.
Is it really? I thought your stomach was.
Depends
Well, I
on
don't know.
whether it's before or after you eat.
Oh, okay.
I suppose it flexes, doesn't it?
But I guess if I'm gonna have the liver out, then it's kind of a marginal case, because they've struggled with it,
Come here.
Come on.
which means that could have a bad result. But what are the percent? Who knows? I don't get this much. I don't know. The oncologist doesn't understand why I'm not in pain from the liver. He just said, it doesn't hurt at all. No, Barry, it doesn't hurt at all. Which is a good thing, but supposed to be the first symptom and the primary symptom is pain.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you feel, George? Do you?
I feel weak, and my back hurts eternally. But other than that, I'm fine.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I haven't had breakfast yet. Don't.
I'm just finishing up.
I slept in this morning. It was wonderful. So, it just kind of.
Gary, did you just get back from your trip?
I got back on Friday, this past Friday, and then
Oh, okay.
I had I don't know what's happened with this week, but it's gotten busy. I mean, busy in the sense that, I've seen people and gone out. I had mass in Windsor I had mass on Sunday in a parish, and then I'm wrestling. I've got the gospel for this. I've said mass. I have mass this Sunday too, and I'm looking at, it's the antitheses in the Sermon on the Mount. You have heard it said, but I say to you, and it's a long gospel. I don't know, Tom, if you're preparing, or Norman, if you're preparing for the weekend, but I'd like to read the shorter version, but I really want to focus on what it said. Jesus, I came to fulfill the law, not to end it. And I guess I have to read all that crap that he goes into about, it just a whole bunch of things I'm saying.
Okay.
So I'm just working on the homily. That's all. That's what I'm going to do this afternoon.
May I make a suggestion, Gary? I'm not preaching at all this weekend. I did the last 2 weekends at St. Bernadette's, but resolve, and I know this could be hard, but resolve to enjoy the reading.
Yeah.
And the continual kind of back and forth play on words that Jesus does there.
Yeah. Well, I have some notes. I preached on this before, and I'm glad I took notes when I was preaching every Sunday, because I can go back to the notes to say, what did I say then? And most of it makes sense to me, but there's always something that you want to reflect on differently. So
When you guys were in seminary, led the latter years before ordination, do you guys work on homilies? Do you prepare homilies and someone looks at them and says, this is an A, or like Father Flynn might have done when we were in high school? Or is it just once you get ordained, it's up to you to pull these things together?
no, we had this guy, Charlie Miller. And when I look back, I think he gave us a pretty good course at homiletics, I think.
A good launching
I
point.
agree. very much.
I'm sorry?
I think he did a great job. He was
Yeah.
Same here.
My only memory, my memory is we had to preach in the refectory during.
Yeah, and some of us were able to go to, what was the name of that church? Mary Magdalene or something?
Mary Magdalene, yeah.
I don't think I ever did that, but I think I know one weekend, one day during the lunch, I had to preach, and I was using the. It was a Feast of Mary, whatever it was, and the entrance antiphon. And I remember saying, so when I walked out on the altar and I was referring to the entrance antiphon, I said, you all said, "Hail, Holy Queen." Place erupted. Hail, Holy Queen, something or other was the entrance antiphon. Because in those days, I thought of the entrance antiphon as like welcoming the priest or something, or that was how we all began at that particular time, And I remember, so when I walked out on the altar, everyone said, "Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy," whatever it was, and I just remember the place kind of. But I remember we had to preach during lunch. Tom, did we ever have to preach in the class?
I think we did.
Probably did.
Naturally, Charlie Miller would practice us in the class, but I do now recall with some terror those lunchtime
I can only imagine.
and the and going. I remember at least once, maybe twice, going to St. Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
What did Charlie Miller teach us anything in high school? Because
No.
was he partially deaf?
He was. Rudy also. His brother.
Rudy Miller is who I'm thinking of.
Yes.
Did Rudy teach us in high school some subject?
Yes.
Yeah, Latin.
Okay. All right.
That's what it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I guess I don't.
Yeah, you
guess
never
I don't.
had. Yeah.
I don't know Charlie Miller then.
Do you
Okay.
guys remember the happening during Lent when everybody was in chapel and doing the Stations of the Cross, and Rudy was hearing confessions, and all of a sudden in the quiet of the devotion that we were all showing at the Stations of the Cross, You hear Rudy Miller shouting from the box, "What? You killed your mother!"
I remember that very well.
Yeah,
As do I, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And
I
someone,
don't at all.
someone had said that because the sin was, I got mad at another.
Yeah.
You can put that in all kinds of different ways. But,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the way he put it,
Yeah.
You know, it was Dave Shaw he was confessing.
was
Is that
it?
right?
Oh, what's it?
I bet Dave was just mortified by that.
Yeah.
Just mortified.
Well,
Probably
he
didn't want to
had
come
a-
out of the box there.
David had a very good sense of humor.
He did.
He, undoubtedly, I don't remember what it was, but I'm sure he had a witty retort.
Yeah, I mean, he saw the absurdity of things.
So tell me, what happened to David Shaw? I lost track of him.
David came to our diocese, to Santa Rosa, and in fact, you know, when I went through my odyssey after Ned and I, Ned was a deacon, I was a subdeacon, and we had that meeting with Hawks, and I guess Hawks assigned you to another parish, and he told me,
Get out of town.
yeah, that I had no vocation for the archdiocese, but he'd recommend me anywhere else I wanted to go. I eventually came to Santa Rosa, and David was one of the reasons that I came, you know, because he was already in ordained and working in a parish there. And then he eventually we ended up together. My first parish was up in Eureka. I was pastor of a parish called Sacred Heart in Eureka, and David was the principal of the high school.
Oh,
And so he lived with me. I remember one afternoon, Tim, you would not remember, we had a class, you would not know, we had a classmate from Arizona named Brent Barden.
Oh yeah,
Well, yeah.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, Brent Barden was from Arizona. Brent was an arrogant guy. One day he called me on the phone, and we were talking, and Dave came in David came in, he finished school, and so I said, David, get on the other line, and you know, it's Brent Barden on the line. So David got on the line, and Brent said, David, how are you? Where have you been? David said, well, I just got in from the high school. And Brent said, high school? He says, you were in a high school. He says, I thought your mother told you never to sweat or hang around people who do.
I'm missing this. I'm missing the joke.
Brent told David, I thought your mother told you never to sweat or hang around people who do. But David was not an athletic kind of guy, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
Of course, neither was Brent.
He was funny.
David then went on to become he became pastor eventually at Resurrection Parish in Santa Rosa, and he was pastor there for many, many years, and he was a very effective pastor. David, you know, it was in those days, of course, that we went through all this stuff with Pat Zeman and the sexual affair he had with one of our priests, Jorge Hume, and it was all in the news. I mean, and then a guy named Don Kimball had been in that parish, and he had been abusing young girls, and so David just led that parish through all kinds of stuff and never pulled punches. I mean, he really was a very effective pastor, very effective and much beloved, and direct, very direct with people. He made a decision, for example, he saw that there were a lot of Hispanic people coming to the masses, you know, in the morning. So he turned the 7:30 Sunday morning mass into a Spanish mass. I mean, who would do that? You know, I mean, that's when your old, you know, when the old guard goes to mass.
Yeah, he's got the wrong end of the day.
Yeah, because the Hispanics got used to, you know, the Latinos are the ones who get the noon mass and the 1 o'clock mass, you know, and the other, and they're the ones that are packed. You know, the English masses, there's a few stragglers here and there, but you know, David was great. And then he retired, And within a year, he got esophageal cancer and he died.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
So in fact, he had dinner at my house here. It was about, I retired a year before he did. And then he had retired. He was helping out in a parish up in Cloverdale. And it was in August of that summer that he came to dinner at my house with another priest, Dan Welton. And during the dinner, and I was in the kitchen or something, I guess he felt some sort of a gripping in his stomach. And it kind of passed. But later on, as months went on, he began to not be able to keep any food down. And then that's when they discovered this cancer. And he lasted another year, but he died, I forget exactly the date now. Was it 2 or 3? It was up 3 years ago, something like that. And, but he was, he was a very effective pastor. I know that. And a good friend, and very witty.
Oh,
very witty. Oh, he was.
Always.
his straightforward nature probably is one of the big reasons that he didn't have a vocation for Los Angeles.
Yeah, I don't know what. He said what he thought.
One of David's expressions, and I think he lived this very well, was he would say somebody was the kind of person who called a spade a goddamn shovel.
That's a keeper.
There was one time he was sitting. Tim, did you never knew Charlie Barr? We've talked a lot about Charlie Barr, who was God. He was a unique fellow, but and I know much beloved among this group.
Much beloved.
I'll remember him coming into the classroom saying, "What am I thinking?" And people knew I didn't know what he was thinking.
People came up with stuff.
But Dave served mass for him. In those days, all the priests said mass on their own little side altars, and Dave served mass for Charlie Barr. Dave had everything set up the way it was supposed to be set up. And whatever happened during the mass, Charlie Barr put the page, and he didn't like what it was, and they took another page, and they put another page, and this and that, and all the things that he had done. David was he was just irritating David, no end. And I forget, David slammed something down on a priest's table, I don't know what. And so they came into the sacristy, and Charlie Barr says, "All right, out with it, kiddo." He says, "You're mad." And David said, "No, Father, I'm angry. You're mad." And at the funeral, the priest, Bill Donahue, is the pastor here at St. Vincent's now, and he was a very close friend of David because he was a student of David's at our high school, and then he became a priest. And Bill, very bright, but he told that story at the funeral. So
was Charlie Barr the guy who taught us driver ed?
Yes.
I can remember because
I see
first aid,
and I have a place to go. Remember that?
Yeah, defensive driving.
That's right. He taught at the high school and in college, didn't he?
He moved with us up to the college.
Yeah.
I remember because I was always stuck, I guess, with Jerry Angrisani up at the front, and he would say, now, I don't know what he referred to us, but he said, "I want you to think that you have an egg underneath the accelerator of your car, and that when you move away," of course, he was talking about a manual shift, a stick shift car. He said, "You don't ever want to crush that egg." And he had so many different ways in which he could express, how to drive. And I remember, I don't remember much any longer, but he said, "Now, if you want to know," and he was a big guy, distance between you and the car ahead of you. A car length for every 10 miles you're going. And he said, and he came up with this formula. I don't think he invented, which I still think of today. He said, if you're going 60 miles an hour, you're going 90 feet per second. I have no idea if that is an accurate statement, but he had all of these little vignettes about driving. And I think he had a piece of shit car that he used to park
Yes.
in the garage.
Yeah.
Was it a 52 Chevy or something? like
Yeah,
that?
like an old Chevy that he was a character.
Oh,
And did he teach Spanish?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
George was his substitute whenever he couldn't be there or had to leave. He said, "George, take over."
The driver training or the Spanish classes?
Spanish class.
yeah, driver training, right.
Yeah, Tom, you quoted that a long time ago. I see you.
You see me, and we both have a place to go.
Exactly.
I still think that on the freeway.
I still do too.
Same here.
Yeah. Does
Yeah.
that person see me? Okay.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, they do. Now, the other thing I think he said, I think he was the one who said, always watch the other car's front tire.
Yes, is it coming towards you? Yes. If it's
Well,
coming towards you.
Or
Yes.
if it's alongside of you, because that's your first indication that he's making a turn.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a time when the vast majority of our class had him as a spiritual director?
Vast majority?
Yeah, much more than half.
You think so?
I do. I thought he was fantastic, and I marveled at the many people that would talk about him as spiritual director. Anyway, now we see our feet. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Ah, yes.
It just,
Oh, yes, we see our.
Ah, yes.
that's what happened, Tim, that's what happened to David Shaw. You know, I want to, George Perrick, you commented on something that Tim said, something about searching for caskets. I've not been part of the
Oh,
conversation the last.
Sandra and
Yeah,
Sandra and I have spent the last 2 weeks making burial plans.
Yeah.
And so I was telling the guys that last week we went in and had to make the decision: do we want to be cremated and going into an urn, or do I want to be put into a box, kind of thing? And so it was just kind of stunning to go into the funeral home and
Yeah.
look at caskets. You know, this one is like the cheapest one was like $3,500. You know, and they went. I mean, if you want to have velvet cushioned inside your casket, which would make you comfortable for eternity, you know, then that's going to cost you even more. It was
well, you know what,
Careful, Tim, that velvet cushion is very flammable.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
and
Okay.
you know, Tim, at the low end, you could order something huge from Amazon and use the box as a casket.
You could. Or, Tim, on that cabinet behind you, right above your head, is
Oh,
the
yeah, you see there.
urn.
Yeah.
Urn,
Perfect
yeah.
urn
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it
Well,
an urn?
we made all the decisions.
So what'd you decide?
We're going to be cremated, and I've already chosen my urn. It's Connemara marble, which is a dark green marble. And so this week we went out to the local cemetery. We have a city-owned cemetery, and then we have 2 privately owned cemeteries. So we went out to the cemetery, and guy's taking us around. He says, "Well, that piece of grass over there is available." And Sandra said, "Well," and she chose one that was near a dogwood tree, because the dogwood is our favorite tree down here in the South. So we go in and we start to do the numbers. And this is where it is unbelievable what the cost of burial is. Now, maybe it's lower, higher where you guys live. I don't know. But I'm telling you, it's just like, just open up your wallet, because nothing is negotiable. It's not like you're in a car dealership where you say, "Well, you know, can I talk to the sales?" It's like, here's what the price is. And if you don't want to stay here, if you don't want to be here for eternity, then do something else. And so it was a financially startling decision, but we made the decision because we didn't want the kids to have to do it.
Right.
And so I'm glad we have it done. It sure made me realize that I'm going to die one day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, what, it strikes me as you're talking, I mean, I haven't done any of that yet. Our diocese has, we have plots for priests in our diocese and things like that. And I have to look into that, but I haven't made that transition yet. I mean, I haven't done that yet. And it was like, I have the same feeling that I had when I made a will, you know, as weird having to make a will, you know, is the beginning of when you think of, you know, the
Inevitable.
going to go. It's all going to go. You know, but once you do it, then it's just you're glad you and I had a trust or whatever. I've updated the trust since then. But now it feels more. I'm glad you have it passed, then you don't think about it anymore.
Well, it was comforting, and it was actually the most moment closest to Christ, which is a kind of a every time I get together with our Cursillo group, one of the things you lead off with was in the last week, guys, what was the closest moment to Christ that you had? Can you share that? Well, mine was Sandra made this decision about what you wanted to have on our marker, and it was together in heaven. You know, so they're gonna, and I thought, you know, and I thought, shit, Elmy, that's not bad for her to think about that. So it was a comforting and kind of a neat spiritual thing to go through. And so I encourage you guys, you know, don't hesitate to do it.
Yeah.
Tim, did you pay for the whole thing in advance?
Yeah, we did, George.
There's
and what they do, George,
Johnny's.
is they at least here they buy you an insurance policy with a company, and you are able to, if let's say we move, let's say we follow our Army kids somewhere, we then can take that policy, which has a value, it has a market value, you know, and we can go to any other funeral home, and most of them accept it and say, okay, I have this, I'll pick a number, a $10,000 pre-need paid policy. Will you accept it? They say, yeah, we'll accept it. And it may be that they say, but our prices are a little different. And so you make up that adjustment, but it's an easy way, George, it's easy to do. It's easy.
Yeah, well, we've done half of it.
Which part did you do?
We've selected the grave site at Resurrection Cemetery.
Is Forest Lawn near you?
Both of them.
Oh, I didn't know
two
there were
of
two.
them are.
Okay, yeah.
Hollywood Hills and then Glendale.
I have a brother who's buried in the Glendale one, and a brother who died before I was born. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, it was always a beautiful place to. Oh, here's Frank Daly. Just a second.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, Frank says, I'm in doctor's appointment. I'll join you shortly.
Oh,
Okay.
I hope he doesn't get irritated with us checking in on him.
I
He's
think
made a few remarks
Really?
that are not in any way in that direction. And I think the way he spoke to his daughter about us reflects a lot on the positive there.
Good. And so can I ask you guys, I don't want to, and so I'm troubled by something this week. In the daily readings, the Old Testament readings all week have been from the book of Genesis.
For a while.
And and so I'm listening. I do this Laudate podcast, you know, and so the kind of the way it has evolved, and I'm really confused by this, but I'm in the presence of some good scholars here.
Oh yeah.
So day one, God does something, and the expression is, and it was good. Day two, he does something, and it was good. And the whole thing as it's unfolding is that he's pleased and he's created goodness. In whatever he did, he created goodness. And so then comes the fairy tale about Adam and Eve and the snake and all that stuff. And so my question that I'm troubled with is, if every single thing that God has created was good, And then in the story, this supposed story about Adam and Eve were walking around the garden and this serpent comes up to them who was basically evil. Did God create evil? He created whatever the serpent figure is supposed to represent. But it just seems inconsistent that the whole story of creation is God was creating perfection. He was creating beauty. He was creating goodness. And so where did the evil come from? And I'm just totally confused by that. Totally confused.
Apparently free will.
Could I make one little comment? I don't think it's quite right to say that God created perfection. We may say that God is perfect, however we want to understand God and however we want to understand perfect. But it is very clear that even the process of creation, what God did actually, in a sense, is create in the whole universe, created something in process that ultimately, depending on free will, may very well end up ultimately unalloyed good.
All right, say that again.
God created a process or beings in process, considering the whole universe. God created beings in process with the intention that they ultimately end up unalloyed good. But one of those goods
It's free will.
that immediately brings in a flaw, shall we say, or let's say makes the process interesting, is free will. Now, the purpose of free will, if we look at it, I think, is to enable us and to enable those beings God creates to love, not just to be programmed to do good things, but to love, to go beyond natural processes in giving oneself creatively on behalf of the other. In other words, that's what God did. God gave himself creatively on behalf of his creation. Now, if you're going to do that without free will, it's slavish performance. It's like a computer program. It's like AI, which I don't think will ever have free will. But it will be a great imitation of it. But in order to have free will, to be able to love, necessitates that one be able not to love, which means to destroy, to hate, to negate, to deny, all of those things. So in a sense, I see evil as the result of our being able to love.
And so
So, for example, Satan is not evil. Satan oriented him, according to our traditional mythology, Satan was one of the greatest angels and oriented himself to himself rather than to where his origin was.
But Tom, where does that instinct, where does that instinct to not love come from? I mean, where does the impulse to do evil come from?
It comes from a lie. And a lie is this good is better than the ultimate good, and so I will choose this good and negate the ultimate good.
Yeah.
Isn't that what St. Thomas said? That we always choose something sub ratione boni.
Yeah. I mean, Hitler chose something very, very good. The superiority of the Aryan race. Now, the identity and integrity of a race of people is a good thing. Choose that to the exclusion of others and to try to do away with the other on behalf of trying to uphold this one value, that's a problem all dictators have.
And so is this, do we naturally then have an inclination to do evil?
No.
No, no, but
Yes.
we do have the capability of believing the lie that this particular thing that I really want is better than the true good. In other words, every one of us does that too. You know that you have to maintain a certain healthy diet, but I really want
These
to.
cookies.
Yeah, I really want to OD on Girl Scout cookies. And so, the addiction kind of almost blinds oneself to any other possibility than immediate gratification.
Is this thing that we call, I don't know if it's called anymore, original sin, is that, I'm trying to, let me ask, and thank you, Tom, because it's been very difficult for me to figure out how we go from God creating goodness, creating beauty. I mean, look up, to how we'll.
And I think when you talk about original sin, I just want to say this because the thought, at my age, the thought might fly out the window. But when you talk about original sin, I do think that Augustine went a little too far off the wrong track in kind of making it a condition that is inherent. And we do have the experience that we can kind of be locked into sin, but are we born into a state of sin?
Right.
That's a question that I think needs more nuance than Augustine was able to give it. That's my
In
feeling.
fact, there are writers. I mean, Matthew Fox would not be the deepest theologian that God ever created, but he's a Dominican. All right, is he an ex-Dominican? I don't know what he is anymore. But
Yeah, he's an Episcopal priest now.
Is that what he is?
Yeah.
But he talked about original goodness as opposed to original sin.
But that original goodness was given a choice, and all of this stuff are great mysteries, I think. But I've struggled with that. My thesis for our master's degree there at the seminary was the transmission of original sin according to St. Thomas Aquinas. I've always been.
What?
I'm sorry.
What was the thesis? The title?
The transmission of original sin.
Oh, okay.
According to St. Thomas.
What do you mean by transmission?
Well, we certainly, we've been talking about the weaknesses that we have. I can't really do better than the Baltimore Catechism, and that's what I concluded when I finished with that thesis. We were good. We are good still, but we were given the opportunity to make a choice between the immediate good in front of us, or perceived good, and the ultimate good that created us, our source. And
here comes Megan Murphy.
Megan. Does it say Megan or does it say Frank?
That's Megan Murphy. See?
It says Megan, yeah.
That means he's at his daughter's house. That doesn't look like
That looks
Megan.
just like Frank.
Yeah, right.
That looks like a young Frank.
Frank was a much younger.
That's right. That's my son-in-law. He said it's the best I ever looked. How are you all?
Welcome back, buddy.
How
Thanks.
are you, Frank?
Good to
How's
be here.
your how's
I'm okay. I had a dermatology appointment, so
Oh, okay.
that's one of the easiest ones. Hey, George, how are you? You look great.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah. You got up early and combed your hair.
Yeah, yeah, I love
You got it all cut off.
Sorry to interrupt, but-
We're talking about
they don't know
George
what they're
Ferrick.
gonna do with me, Frank. They're either gonna chemotherapy me or actually operate on my liver and make it much smaller. And they're deciding.
Yeah, okay. Well, the only shortcoming of the second one is you're gonna have to cut the Scotch glass in half.
with
Or
Scotch glass.
Yeah,
or your evening martini crook. You have to cut
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Oh.
whatever. Yeah,
you
yeah.
barely drink anymore, do you, George?
No,
Oh, that's a
Pretty
sad
sad,
state of
sadly.
affairs. Oh my God. Oh,
They
yeah, it is
don't
a
call them
sad state of
spirits for nothing.
yeah.
what do the Irish
But
call
I
it?
find
The water
it's
of
not
life.
out of some
Water,
virtue.
Ishkabaha, the water of life, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I just don't miss it.
yeah, I don't miss it when I don't have it either, so.
Uh,
You
Um,
also don't miss food.
yeah,
Mm.
that's weird. I am not eating enough, and I don't care to eat enough. I don't
Yeah.
like food.
But you look
You know.
good and you sound
Well,
well.
thank you,
Yeah.
thank you.
But actually,
I was going to say something to Tom.
Yes, sir.
Tom, you talked about, alluded to all the other evil creatures swirling around the universe. And I assume you were talking about what St. Paul refers to as, dominions and powers and
Principality.
the spirit of the air and all that
Yep.
stuff.
Actually, I wasn't.
Okay.
I was referring more to what these fabulous space telescopes are revealing about the violence that is within the formation of the various structures of our universe. That
Uh-huh.
that the again, the universe, what God created was not something static. What God created was something in the process of continuing to become whatever it's going to become. And I don't think that's really clear to us yet. I don't think they've even quite, come to a firm conclusion about whether the physical universe will end in a big crunch or a big freeze. And so, but everything, within that process of whatever happens after the Big Bang, I mean, it happens through instability and what we would label violence.
But it's ordered. It's it's
Well, sort of.
ordered. No, that I think that
Sort of.
quantum physics, astrophysics, I think that they are reaching deeper and deeper understandings of how much order there is in what we see as chaos. That's just my
Yeah,
my
I myself don't quite read it that way. I see more quantum physics when you deal with the great big stuff and when you deal with the, tiniest fragments of subatomic stuff. What we've term, the laws of physics just go out the window. And so they're continually needing to be, stepping back. There doesn't seem to be order here. Step back a little bit. Well, maybe there is a sort of order that we haven't really recognized. But it's not, it's not just a refinement of the Newtonian, Isaac Newton's idea of the clockwork sort of universe. There's, everywhere we look, there is chaos, but stuff is coming out of the chaos. Whether you call it order or not, I don't know. But anyway, that's my.
What if that's reflected in the, a lot of businesses now talk about chaos theory. That in fact reflects what you're saying. And even Pope Francis talks about make a mess. So it's not to create the chaos or make the mess for their own purpose, but it's probably an insight into nature.
You know what that brings to mind, and then I will throw this out and shut up. In our youth, there were significant movements that we were a part of in one way or another, of trying to destroy or topple the established order in order to replace it with something new. And that's exactly the language that these crazy, from our perspective, crazy ultra-conservatives, the Marjorie Taylor Greene types and so on, and the Trump types are basically saying they don't have a plan except to destroy what is and see what happens. And then replace it with something that is found and is created in their own image and likeness. It just dawned on me that we were saying something the same thing in the 60s and the 70s.
It's called anarchism, the way the Republicans are doing it.
Yeah, but
except that we were kind of reaching for what we saw as a more sensible order.
Maybe they are
acceptable
too.
order.
Maybe they are too.
Well,
we will have sense when all the people who disagree with us are gone.
Yeah, but Tom,
well,
Marjorie
but no,
Taylor's-
when all the people who disagree with us, who aren't operating from good motives, are gone.
Yeah, better said.
Well, that's better said, but I'm not sure that that's really
realistic,
really operative, because we attribute bad motives to people who disagree with us. At least that's our tendency.
No.
Well, but the Republicans, what exactly is their goal and their program here?
To destroy everything that the Democrats have done, and let's see what we can rebuild. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm reflecting off the top of my head. That's becoming increasingly tenuous. But
yeah, they just
that's how ideas kind of.
anarchists.
Yeah, but ideas. Well, anarchy is your motive is to create. But what Tom is talking more is a natural process where the motive is not to create so much destruction as to recognize that there are forces in nature that work against each other. And the point is, how do we get beyond that to something new? Am I misstating, Tom?
Probably. I don't know. My brain has suddenly turned tired.
You should have stayed at the doctor's.
Yeah.
Well, these are tiring matters,
They are. They are, but I'm just wondering if the more things change, the more they stay the same.
I think that's
how
the
there
question.
is that.
Yeah. And so before you came in, Frank, we were talking about original sin. I know, great. It's not as much fun as Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Ned was talking about his master's thesis. And what did you call it? The transmission of evil?
No, transmission of original sin.
Transmission of original
According
sin.
to Thomas Aquinas.
Who was your
That-
moderator, Ned? Who was your moderator for that?
Oh my goodness, senior moment. It was, who was Tom, the new priest who came to teach us systematic theology or whatever, introduction to theology.
Pat
First
Thompson.
year of, pardon?
Pat Thompson.
Pat Thompson. He was my
Good
moderator,
call.
yeah.
Good,
Yeah.
Pat Thompson, he was wonderful. Just absolutely, I was enthralled by that guy.
good deal.
Yeah, and I had Father church history, Eberhard,
Eberhard.
in the mix, and Nuff, no, not Nuff.
EJ,
No, no, I would have flunked. He didn't like me very much. Anyway, that whole concept, that whole wonderment about the origins and how we got from creation as an unalloyed good, as you characterized it, Tom, to where we are now. And in some ways, it seems to me that whoever said the more we change, the more we stay the same, it seems to be kind of a circular thing that goes on, and somehow we've got to break out of that circle because the angels apparently have a very dim description of their rebellion, those that did rebel, along with the carrier of light. And then we skip to Adam and Eve, and begin to wonder how Adam and Eve, with their unalloyed goodness, choose themselves, or the lie, as Tom says, instead of the ultimate source. That just boggles me.
Yeah. Well, to me, the process is simple, that you become captivated with something other than what is ultimately important.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
you haven't crossed the threshold of sin yet, of rejection. of
Well, yeah,
the ultimate.
I don't know about the threshold of sin or rejection. Basically, rejection begins with ignoring, doesn't it?
Well, I think it begins with somehow growing into oneself, as Pope
Yeah,
Francis said. The church is self-referential, and you begin that process, and you're on the way to damnation.
Yeah. I think we're saying the same thing.
But
Yeah.
the
But,
old
to my mind, taking the Genesis account, that is a mythological telling of something that's trying to capture a deeper truth. And I think that the scriptural authors, tradition makers, storytellers, whatever behind what got this, operating under the influence of the Holy Spirit. These people were aware of being chosen by God in a way that other people weren't. But operating under that, what they saw was, hey, humankind is really, really screwed up. Why? So for original sin, you're not talking from doctrine down to reality. You're talking from reality and trying to figure out, why are things this way? Yeah, and
so if you had grandchildren, if you have grandchildren, and they are reading the Bible, okay, and they ask you questions about Adam and Eve and all of that, is there a way to a young person who's innocent, and I really can't imagine that my granddaughter has a stain of sin on her soul, but anyways, original sin.
That's a black
Why haven't we, I mean, the church or Christianity, why haven't we tried to put the story of the Garden of Eden in I kind of see it sometimes as like building a house on sand. Is if you start out by saying, well, the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve and all of that, and original, in that we then have that all of us who are descendants of Adam and Eve have this stain of sin on our soul when we're born, and you have to be baptized to get rid of it. Why do we build that storyline on a house of sand? Because I think Adam and Eve.
I have an interesting thought on that, and that is in our teaching, what we try to do is bring a lot of reflection on experience into a statement that is an answer to a question. And what we don't do in teaching your grandchildren, when your grandchild asks that question, I wonder if the first and best answer might be, well, what do you think? What is that story telling to you? And keep asking questions in a way that might be able to lead them to come to insight rather than simply answers. And maybe teach Grandpa something too.
Yeah, Carl Rogers, who was a flash in the pan, I think, for a while was followed by a whole bunch of
he was okay.
hippies. Pardon me?
He was okay. Just like you're okay.
Okay, you're okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Carl's okay.
I do you remember Keneally giving us a talk? We didn't have him. Oh yeah, we did. We had him for systematic theology at one point. But I remember his telling us his version of what it meant, the whole first several chapters of Genesis. He said it was a myth that was intended to make various points. I could tell a different story, he said, and then he told a story of chickens. Does anybody remember that at all? And the story tracked Adam and Eve. And he said it doesn't tell the full story, of course. It's trying to simply say God created everything. God created us good. There was a rebellion or some John Henry Newman calls it a primordial catastrophe. And we wind up with weakened wills and dim minds. And that to me makes a whole lot of sense, because our appetites now have, at least in the beginning, dominion or whatever over our decisions, appetites, hunger, pleasure, whatever it is. And I can't go any further than that. Somehow, primordial catastrophe, and we're weak-willed and dim-witted, and we struggle with that. Some of us appear to be more bright than others. Some of us lead, some of us follow. Tim, I don't know that there's an answer to any of that.
But Ned, none of what we've said, I think, since Tom brought it up, comes anywhere near to an answer to the question of why.
I agree.
Why?
Nobody has been able to answer that question.
Pardon me,
I
Tom?
don't think, it sort of, well, wouldn't you say that the closest that the scripture has come to trying to address that answer would be in the book of Job?
Yes.
And the book of Job basically says that is not yours to know.
Yeah.
Well, but that's specifically focusing on injustice and, why did a good egg like Job have to go through all this stuff?
Which does boil
It
down
doesn't
to,
address evil per se, or human evil.
but
I
if
mean,
the
he's
answer
pretty
to the
much,
one is it's not yours to know, isn't the answer to the other it's not yours to know?
well, probably, sure. There's a lot of Turks that got to be asking that question.
Oh
Isn't
my
there,
God, there are.
isn't
are.
that, I mean, there's that one passage in Paul when he's reflecting on his own, he says that, the good that I want to do, I don't do, and what I don't want to do is what I do.
Yeah.
And of course, that's when he just ends up saying,
Thanks be to God.
grace. I mean, it's when you experience your helplessness and all of that, but it's a mystery.
Mm-hmm. Norm, weigh in on this.
Yeah,
You've been the
it's
silent
very
partner
interesting for me
here.
because I ask the same questions very often. Why the stories of Genesis, when they're just it's people had to explain to their children, how we came into being, how this whole thing came about, and so they told the story. They had nothing else, no other information, other than just to say, well, there had to be two people that started the whole thing off, and they must have messed up somehow because basically we're good, and somehow they must have messed up, and we were stuck now with the trouble that we have good things that we do and bad things we do, and we don't have any explanation for why or how that happens. And so I understand that grandparents will be telling their kids, well, listen, somehow it got screwed up, it got messed up, and they had the story of Adam and Eve, and the story of Cain and Abel, the story of Job, the story of all these things, and basically ending up with saying, we don't know.
I kind of think that maybe because of St. Augustine, the Catholic theology focuses almost exclusively on the screw up.
Yes.
And the Easter Vigil says, "O Felix culpa, O happy fault,
Yeah.
O necessary sin of Adam." Well, what does that mean if it doesn't mean that in the face of such overwhelmingly original evil, there was originally original good? And that dilemma, yes, it's a mystery, but in the Easter Vigil again, Christ is seen, the incarnate Christ, the risen Christ is seen as the antithesis to what Adam brought to the table.
Amen.
And so I think Catholic theology, frankly, I mean, how do we deal with things like Psalm 8, not just Catholic theology? What is man that you've made him? You made him a little less than God. Juxtapose that to the garden. Or what does it mean? What's the theology of God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son? So I think there's an undeveloped Catholic theology. And, most people blame St. Augustine. And of course, the realism of St. Augustine was that he had a very sinful life himself. But the underdeveloped Catholic theology is that the first focus is on sinfulness, etc. I heard a recent webinar on the Eucharist, and it was the Eucharist. I knew it was going to be traditional, it was on sacrifice, but the resurrection was hardly ever mentioned. And this has always kind of troubled me a little bit, which is that you're not sweeping sin aside, but recognizing, for instance, there's a strain in all of us, but it's not the only strain. So that's kind of how I react to it.
You know, there's an article in America that's a little longer than normal articles that appear there, and it purports to give us an idea of morality and the emphasis that we put on one or another side of morality, and he takes you through the early times in the church where the Eucharist was the ultimate gathering, the meal, and the emphasis was on loving one another, building community, being generous in spite of all of the persecution that the first guys suffered. And then gradually, after Constantine makes Christianity the empire's religion, gradually we descend into some kind of juridical model where they begin to categorize sins and name them, put them in different categories, and now we're into some kind of lists of sins, and the emphasis is on don't commit sins rather than love one another. And recently, till very recently, we're now turning around and putting the emphasis on love one another as I have loved you. And while not, of course, letting go of the fact of sin, we do commit sins. We are weak. We make wrong decisions. Still, the love for one another is what rescues us from anywhere from deep addiction to self-centeredness. There's a enough. Does that make it?
You're making me mindful, Ned, that my experience is Pope Francis is all on what you just described. And those who are resisting him are looking back to the lists and the keeping track. And that brings me, I don't know if the rest of you care much, but this work towards synodality. If love isn't at the center of synodality, then we'll be going backwards. Norman, I saw you nod.
Yes, I agree with you completely. I think Francis has changed the direction of that theological insights, to why evil exists. And I think that he's changed it, that we are called to be people who bring love and bring care to each other, instead of just, concentrating on, gee, what sins do I have that I need to confess this week,
And part of that is the undoing of knots. I keep coming back to that if that concept is welcomed into this next year and a half on synodality, then I have great hope and confidence. But what a great patroness for the stage we're in.
But the church is beginning to look like our politics, because I don't know why, but I get these feeds, and so there were some feeds from the Church Militant and from a couple of other. I know it's some of the other what you might call right wing. I don't know if that's the appropriate thing. We were just so critical of some of the commentary that the Pope has made recently, and so man, I hear what you guys are saying, and it seems to me like wishful thinking, given that there is a powerful voice in the church, at least in America, a powerful voice against Francis. And what I mean by powerful is it's got the right-wing media you know, it's got the Tucker Carlsons, it's got, I saw the interview with that church militant did this Voorhees guy of Marjorie Taylor Greene, professing she had this huge cross between her boobs that were very evident. You know, I thought, well, that's really symbolic, you know. And it wasn't exactly what I call a go for it Papa Francis. It was like all of the mistakes that the church is making these days. So I see now, maybe I'm over emphasizing the impact that the right-wing Christian Catholic media has, but it's really powerful. It's got a natural seating with Republican Party, and it's got a lot of money. Yeah,
Like money and honorable, really wonderful prelates like Pell. You know, that message that was found that's now been confirmed to come from his hand, saying that synodality is a pipe dream. You do have powerful folks saying
there are many people in Australia who would not call Pell a wonderful prelate.
Yeah.
He was wonderful during his false imprisonment, I think. I mean, heroically so. But for all those years, he was an ass-kicking, no prisoners, you know, right-wing prelate.
Yeah, I was thinking about, we had a group, the priests were invited to go to Palm Springs for a conference, and I think there's about 300 priests or so. And there is definitely a group that is against, you know, what's going on as far as the church is going right now. But there were 30 of them, and there were 300 priests there. So there's still a lot of priests who see that there's hope, you know, and that Francis is bringing hope. Now they are the anti-Francis ones. They're very, you talk to them about Francis, they get all upset and angry and say that he's leading us to hell. But the thing is that there are many more who are seeing hope, you know, in what Francis has been doing, and in synodality and all this kind of good stuff.
Well, that's
but there are
good to
some.
hear.
Yeah, it is good to hear. Believe me.
Norm, are these 30 younger than you? Are they?
Yes.
They are young.
Yes, they are.
They are young. And
We're
stupid.
We're the old fogey.
It would be harder for them to be older.
They are the rebels that we were.
Exactly. You know, I told Danny Walsh, our bishop, prior bishop, one time, you know, I said, when I was a young priest, we all bought into the Second Vatican Council, and I over the years I have concluded I am so glad I was a priest when I was when I was in active ministry. These guys are good at having a whole different experience. I'm glad we were priests during all of that time of it was a time of unearthing and changing of directions and stuff like that.
And of hope.
Post-Vatican, there was always people who disagreed, but eventually I thought they were fading away. But they're the younger group. But now I was telling Danny Walsh, you know, we're the old fogies, and they're the ones, like Tom, you said, they're the ones who are rebelling now, just the way we did, or our generation did before. But you know, Tim, this whole business of synodality, I've always thought to myself, the Second Vatican Council, when it was called, all these bishops came from all over the world, and what's his name said, is it John O'Malley?
Jesuit, yeah.
He wrote the book on what happened at Vatican II.
Right.
He's at the biggest meeting in the world, the biggest meeting that's ever been held. 2,500 bishops for 3.5, 4 years. They all came from their dioceses. They were in contact with their priests, who were in contact with their people, and so somehow or other, the whole church was involved through the priest who had listened to their people were doing. That's what that whole question of birth control and all that sort of stuff was, because this is not working. This is not realistic for us. And it began to filter back into the core, if you will. And I think the Second Vatican Council was in many ways, if you think about the whole dynamic, was synodality. You know, a lot of the stuff floated in from, if you want to put it, the outskirts, or, you know, I mean, I remember seeing a model from a triangular model to a series of concentric circles, you know, and the whole church was involved. That somehow, and all of Francis is doing is continuing that dynamic in a more formal way, I think.
And so why are the younger group like this? I mean, what has happened that you guys have noticed maybe in your own parishes? I mean, why is it that they have they've drinking the Kool-Aid?
Well, I think part of it is, you know, that we haven't, that the seminary model is Tridentine. And that therefore, for many seminaries, the formation model is Tridentine. And they haven't been opened up to any kind of, I mean, I think Fred could speak to this probably pretty well in terms of historical consciousness and you know, and kind of I'm reluctant to use the word frozen, but the frozen structure of neo-scholasticism versus historical consciousness. And so that you know, they're being trained and educated in one rather than the other. And Vatican II, you know, the Irish Bishop Paul Tye, I mentioned this last week, says, you know, the Roman Catholic Church is not the corporate headquarters, it's the hub. And the corporate headquarters was the model from Constantine in the 4th century. And just think about what it takes to change something like that, that's been the model since the 4th century. And I think that's what we're undergoing. And a lot of people, the bishops came to Vatican. It was very interesting. Vatican. I was in Rome for 2 of those years. And some of them weren't great theologians, frankly. A lot of them were pretty good pastors. And so they were presented 2 alternatives. And when one was, in fact, maybe alien to their theology, but very much responsive to their pastoral needs, that's what they voted for. And this is a thing that's going to go on for, you know, most scholars will say, you know, it takes 100 to 150 years for a council to sink down into the church, to filter its way into the church. And so I think that's my humble opinion of what's happening.
So let me ask you this, Frank. I mean, seminaries are pretty well controlled by bishops, or at least that's my lay sense. Are a lot of these young guys coming out who are of that ultra right-wing mindset, are they reflecting the bishop and the attitude of the bishop, or are they sometimes
I'd like to make a little reflection on that one, Tim, because under Mahoney, I thought our seminaries had great leadership, or our seminary. You know, people like Craig Cox and Helmut Hefner and who else? That had some really, really great leadership, good teachers, good theologians, and all of that were up there. Paul Ford, Mark, what's his name? And so on and so forth. Anyway, yet, Jack Stager too was there. But one thing that they were complaining about at that time, as I remember, was there was this underground movement of seminarians that were, you know, saying and doing the right things to get through their classes, but under their clerical shirts and cassocks and all of that were, basically giving the finger to everything that was being taught and done in the overt seminary culture. There was a covert seminary culture that was really promoting these things, and gave rise to these young dudes.
And that, and a lot of that came, yeah.
Yeah. So,
You
but
know, I
then,
asked Father
in the
Sandoval.
since what's his name, Jose Gomez, that movement has kind of come to the surface, and he's appointing all of these Opus Dei guys now to be seminary professors and leaders, and that's a little scary.
I was talking to San Francisco has two vicar generals, and one of them, Steve Howell. He said he's the guy who's always running around the offices with a cup of coffee, and he doesn't know quite what he's doing there. But he was at some sort of vocation directors meeting, national meeting, and he says this core, whatever you want to call it, is a reality in every seminary, whether it's a liberal or a conservative or whatever you want to call it. And a lot of them are formed not from some of them are formed from their classes, but a lot of them are getting their stuff through the internet, through,
That's what Father Sandoval says here.
Yeah.
That's what Parker said, because you dial Roman Catholic teaching or something. There's 14 websites that are all these little, the pre-Vatican II groups. I mean, and a lot of those seminarians are getting that stuff from there. And Tim, I've often thought I don't have any empirical evidence at all. I've just thought that a lot of these young people grew up in a very tumultuous world and are looking for some kind of stability, and they have this sense that the church before was more stable than it is now.
The sad part too is that they think that Pope Francis is a heretic.
Yeah.
In Boston, the seminary actually, part of the seminary grounds was purchased by Boston College to pay off some of the sex abuse payments. And so the seminary, with its theological faculty, is within walking distance of Boston College's theological faculty. But virtually never the twain shall meet.
Yeah.
So why couldn't, if only for some courses, why couldn't the seminarians go across the street and sit in the class
with Fred,
with men and women who are dedicated
to
their faith and to learning about it and teaching about it and going on mission about it, not people who are going to taint them? It's a mindset. I mean, it just doesn't happen.
Norm, so if you think about this meeting you had of 300 priests and 30 of them were hardliners, look ahead 10 years. Do you think that proportion is going to change a lot?
Doesn't look like it. Because you have all these seminarians now in our seminary who are being trained in that kind of theology. They think of Francis as being a heretic, and they'd love to get him out of there, and they're hoping that the next pope will be a person who is along their lines of thinking, which would be it'd be horrible.
Norman,
I'm
sorry, I don't see how that happens. I mean, I know it does, I know it's etc. But there are some wonderful members of the faculty out at St. John's. Father Mullins,
who's gone.
Yeah, well, he is gone, yeah. That Polish priest that teaches scripture.
Yes, he's good.
Yeah, I mean,
But they're
and
bringing in, but see, Gomez is bringing more and more and more professors who are along that line of thought.
Opus Dei?
Yes.
Hmm.
why would he do that?
Well, because he's
He's
Opus
Opus
Dei
Dei.
himself.
Well, aren't there a majority of bishops who have these huge responsibilities for their dioceses, and they need stability, they need roads and structures that will allow them to feel halfway comfortable that the faithful are being given right doctrine. And then we have the theology departments at major universities with professors who are open
Right.
more than anybody else to speculation and wonderment, and they teach this stuff, and you know, bishops are sitting there saying, heaven, you know, get away from me. I don't want to have instability nurtured by all kinds of intellectual speculation. So, you know, you've got the need for stability and the attraction that brings, and the need for going outside the box to try to understand these mysteries that we have.
Frank, I am going to sign up for the 3 workshop series at Boston College on synodality. Have you all seen that? That's coming up.
Yeah.
I think it's a great opportunity to get the language that we're searching for right now.
Well, let me just throw out this for a minute in terms of, you know, not be bishop bashing, because I think it's a really difficult thing in the Catholic Church in the United States today to be a bishop.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
a very, very, very difficult life. But among the bishops, how many of them do you think, or can you think of, who have some of the kind of creative pastoral outreach and touch that Francis has?
Well, he's been appointing them, which is nice.
Well, the guy,
Not,
McElroy.
I mean, well, but you don't know who they are.
the guy in
Right.
San Diego, your cardinal.
Well, I mean, there's the 2 of them among what, 292?
No, supposedly, Gary would be able to speak to this, I think. Francis's episcopal appointments are gonna kind of mass in the foreseeable future. In other words, there's more and more and more and more of Francis bishops are gonna take out the helms. And these guys are serious, you know. They are not patsies for Strickland in Texas or somebody, you know. So by
I
and
mean,
large,
how many American bishops can you name who on the other side of the spectrum have the same kind of influence and exposure that the bishop of one of the smallest dioceses in the United States has? Tyler, Texas.
yeah. Well, the Bishop of El Paso, whose name I can't think of.
Of course you can't think of his name, but you know Strickland's name.
Seats.
Yeah.
His name is Seats, Mark Seats. Is the
Yeah,
bishop
that's
of El
right. Yeah.
Paso.
Yes,
Yeah.
And he's
that's
supposed
right.
to be
Yeah.
Yes,
rather cool.
Yeah.
And the Bishop of Brownsville, Texas, whom I've heard preach,
Peter
is
Flores.
Yeah.
I think cause for great optimism.
Yes, he
Except
is,
he's
from what I
close.
hear, because he is, you know, a profound man who's able to bridge the gap. He's not simply coming down on one side.
Yeah.
That's what I hear about Flores.
And the guy in San Antonio now is supposed to be pretty pretty stable and pretty centered.
You know what is
Well, let's
common
not forget Wilton Gregory
Yeah,
and Wensky in Florida.
Florida.
You know,
What
they
is-
are they're also quite well known, and they're very Francis oriented.
So there's a new bishop of South Carolina who lives in Charleston. He's Haitian. And
Oh,
He-
that'll go over.
well, interesting choice for South Carolina, right? However, this is a guy who visits every parish. He is warm, receptive, and so a friend of mine goes to a parish down in Greenville, South Carolina, which is about 30, 40 miles down the hill from us. And the pastor, who was an African immigrant, was in an affair with one of his parishioners.
Oh, dear.
And so, yeah, and so the bishop removed him. You know, said, you know what? I'll pick a name. Norm, you've got to step aside, you know.
Thanks.
Well, the parish was so much in love with this pastor that they petitioned the bishop, and they said, where, come on. And so the bishop recanted or changed his mind and reinstated the pastor. And for the very first mass that this reinstated pastor had, the bishop shows up, this Haitian guy shows up, and he said, it's pretty hard for me to preach forgiveness and compassion of Christ and not accept what this man has said was a sinfulness on his part and all of that. Well, the parish was just thrilled. And so local news, because we get Greenville news here, the local news was bishop reinstates adulterer. I mean, so how the, you know, just, yeah. And, but there's something common about the bishops you guys were naming. They're all border. They're, I don't know if they are Latino bishops down there in Brownsville, San Antonio, El Paso, but that's what I was sort of hearing, is that they were not Anglos, they were not WASPs, they were Latinos. And that maybe is a great sign. Maybe that's a positive thing.
Brownsville, El Paso, San Antonio, but you're right.
George, how do you find
Garcia Stiller? I mean, San Antonio's Gustavo Garcia Stiller. I mean, he's from Chicago, but obviously has a Latino background.
Yeah.
George, how do you see your brother-in-law's successor?
Kind of a pendejo, honestly.
Okay.
An idiot and a moron.
Hey, Crook, you may know this because of your relationship with him. Does an outgoing bishop have any influence at all on who is chosen to succeed him?
Not usually, I think.
Really?
I mean, he'd never heard of the guy, or he certainly didn't know him. The successor was an auxiliary in Chicago, selected by Cardinal George way back when, or came in on George's tenure.
That's illogical. And why wouldn't somebody be saying to Barnes? I mean, Barnes is the name of your brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about this diocese. What do you see as the need? What's the character of the diocese? And
Well, there is a certain sense in which that kind of discussion goes among the regular meetings of the bishops of a province have.
okay.
So the bishops of a province meet on a regular, and sometimes on the agenda is succession planning.
Yeah.
So whether or not, I mean, I would expect that the residential bishop would have input, even if there was no outreach, that he could offer it to the apostolic nuncio.
Yeah, I don't think
But
that happened.
Pardon?
I don't think that happened.
Yeah.
In
Well,
your
you think bishops, that's another thing that bishops should do. Call
Yeah,
up the apostolic nuncio and say, look at this is a critical part of, our diocese, and that you really have to look at. But
Yeah.
that discussion, some of that discussion, I think, takes play in the regular provincial meetings of the bishops.
sure. They, with my brother-in-law, it was kind of screwed up because he gave his 75-year notice right on schedule, and the Vatican just forgot. And so he calls them up when he's 75 in a day and says, well, guys, and they said, oh shit. So they sent this guy out and extended my brother-in-law's term for a year to teach him. But it hasn't been a raving success. And not that there's animosity or, any of this divisiveness we've been talking about. The guy's a moderate conservative. But he's just kind of a pendejo as far as I can tell.
George, remember the run up to Jerry's appointment. We had Mahoney and was it Supich? I don't know, but several guys told Jerry he was slotted and was confirmed, and it was all but done that he would be Archbishop of El Paso.
No, of San Antonio.
I'm sorry, in San Antonio. So there were all kinds of guys weighing in, as Tom says, with their convictions that because of their recommendations and of what they were responses that they were getting, that Jerry was going to be the next Archbishop of San Antonio.
Why, even McCarrick said so.
Right, even McCarrick. And then he sued Bishop from Boston. And that just stopped everything.
Law,
And
Bernard Law.
Yes, he sued Cardinal Law. Law sent him out here, a notorious pedophile whose name Frank's familiar with.
Paul Shanley.
Shanley.
Yeah.
Shanley, just notorious, disgraceful. I mean, just fraud, with a letter that said priest in good standing. Well, no, he wasn't. And so my brother-in-law kept calling Law, hey, Bernard, you need to indemnify us for this. Boss is rich, we're poor, He didn't grow up on my watch, he grew up on yours. And Law just kept blowing him off. And so finally, Ricky just sued him for indemnity in civil court. It'd be a classic case. I mean, do you know what indemnity is, guys?
No.
I'm on the hook legally for something you did. Like, an employer typically, has a truck driver that gets drunk and takes out a few people in rush hour. Well, he could sue bad example, actually, but he could sue the truck driver for indemnity. I'm a status defendant, but you did it. So that's what he did with Law. And gee, all the kudos seem to stop,
So there are both sides there. All of this conversation among people who thought they were, cardinal makers or bishop makers, and
or at least
as soon as Jerry sued, they were all put aside, and the top down configuration.
That was under John Paul.
They got the seat.
That was under John Paul II then, right? It wasn't under Francis. It was not under Francis.
No, it was under John Paul when Shanley was there. Yeah.
But no, it was John Paul.
And people like Burke. Oh, I don't know. We live in a divided church. That's I believe it's just easier for me to think that we have an unofficial schism in the Catholic Church, in the Roman Catholic. It's not official. But we live in a divided, like we live in a divided country.
We ought to be careful about going that far, Gary, I would think. I mean, St. Paul went to Corinth and said, there's all sorts of divisions here as well.
Mhm.
I'm so on foot, and I forget the names, but so I don't think the kind of church we're living in it's a first timer, if you will. But then I'd have to concede that you're right. It wouldn't be the first time there was a schism either.
Well, I mean, I don't mean a schism, not in an official way, but there's a major division, and
But even Francis himself, I think, is preventing the schism by his office. I don't see any of the even the harshest critics of Francis professing sedevacantism.
Oh, there's some.
There are
You
some,
know,
but I think they're even a fringe of a fringe.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's.
So
There was- Plus,
I
when Benedict was around, there was a variation on the theme. It was called something like Benevacantism,
yeah.
because there was a group of them that felt that Francis was never legitimately elected pope.
Yeah.
and that's
But
a tough one.
you are right. That's a
Trumpism in the church.
And the thing is, Protestantism was supposed to be unified by the Holy Spirit, and that ended up being as fragmented as a crystal goblet being hit by a hammer.
Yeah, what, 3,000 Protestant
Yeah.
denominations?
And-
there were?
And let's face it, the Orthodox, especially now,
oh,
the divisions within the Orthodox, even between Russia and
oh,
and
Ukraine.
Constantinople,
Yeah,
they can't
that
hold things
patriarch,
together.
or metropolitan, I guess it is, whatever he is, in
Yeah.
Moscow.
look what's happening to the Anglican Communion.
yeah.
Or
Yeah.
look at the Methodist.
So is this
Gary Lombardi,
you're down the road?
Gary, we're down to the last 10 minutes or so, and I'm still curious, where are you on your homily for Sunday?
Oh, well, I'm gonna finish it up. I have notes from the past. I was doing some research. Because when you start talking to a congregation about divorce, it was said you were allowed to, but I say about looking on with lust at another. I mean, you've got to comment in some way. I mean, it's like poor people out there hearing that thing without any nuance whatsoever. I mean, it's like, geez. So I'm going to comment a little bit about these things, and anger, But basically, I'm just going to focus on the fact that what Jesus is talking about is getting to the heart, the internal spirit of a person's life rather than rule keeping, and to be
Yeah.
free of.
That's the heart of it.
I'm sorry.
That's the heart
Yeah,
of. That's the heart
that's
of
the heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then to be free of all these things is a much better place, better way to live. I mean, in the end, you're happier when you don't reduce people to objects.
And do you think Super Bowl parties are a worthy circumstance to include in your homily?
No, I will simply say, I hope whoever you're rooting for wins.
That's the safe way to go.
I always talk about that today is Saint Super Bowl Sunday. I mean, and of course when the 49ers are playing, I always remember sometimes it was a few times when they I don't know if it was the Super Bowl or some of these championship games, everybody in the parish, of course, we're all 49er fans, and the 49ers sometimes would pull something out at the last second. And the next Sunday, I would just look at them and say, I never doubted them for a second. We're all going through conniptions, but No, you always mention Super Bowl. Let me just mention it, but no, but not as part of the homily. It just, no, but that's what I'm going to focus on. I just was thinking that you need to make comments about some of the things that are said there. And I'd like to use a shorter version, but the shorter version does not include the very first words of Jesus in the gospel, that I have come to fulfill the law. The law is trying to enshrine a deeper value, and that's what he's talking about, and that's what we all want. We want to have, I don't want to simply observe a rule because it's a rule. I want to have the internal attitude that's behind the rule. That's what I strive. That's why I always pray to God to transform me.
One of my favorite scripture scholars is Amy Jill Levine. She's Jewish. She's a New Testament scholar who is
She's
Jewish.
at Vanderbilt. She's at Vanderbilt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Very good.
and she's got some excellent insights from a Jewish perspective, and she's written on the Sermon on the Mount. And one of the things that she points out in this particular antitheses section is that from a Jewish perspective, there were all of the minute regulations of the particularly the Pharisaic and rabbinic Judaism were intended to be a fence around the Torah, so that defining just exactly how far you could go and before you abandoned the covenant that was related to the Torah. And it all became very meticulous and all of that stuff. And what she says was that Jesus was basically creating his own fence around the Torah from an internal perspective rather than an external perspective, from a motivational perspective rather than a behavioral perspective. So, for whatever that's worth,
it won't take me long to finish this thing.
Yeah, good.
Because I have notes anyway. I'll probably just add a few little things here and there, and I'm going to tell them there's a lot going on in the gospel. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of it. Here's where I want to focus, and then kind of be done with it. So.
Back on Girl Scout cookie.
Tell him Tim's. Excuse me, Tom. Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Maybe tell him Tim's story about the bishop and the priest.
Which one?
The one where he had taken up with the woman. And then the bishop went. And
Yeah. But I think I really do think I look at our diocese and kind of where our bishop is and how I just say we just live in a different world. I don't know what else to say.
That's a good way to say it.
Well, we do. I don't have any kinship with these guys, some of these priests. I just don't. And I just think it's not where it's going to happen, Tim. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I think some of these young priests, if they have a pastoral heart, that's going to change them.
That's the prayer. That has to be the prayer. Yeah.
If they don't have a pastoral heart, they're just going to minister to a particular small group of people.
Yeah.
If they're blessed by grace, they'll have a parishioner who says to them someday, "Father, can we talk?"
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
True.
I'm with the pastoral experience.
On my screen, there is a black rectangle.
Yes.
With a phone number that indicates, I think George Farrick is still listening in, and he is not muted. And I would like to ask George,
here I am.
Give us a parting shot, a parting thought. Sum up all of this that you have heard in in 100 words or less. And
Yeah, I've dissolved. Yeah, I've been taking notes, and I've been doing some. I've been listening and doing some work here in my office, kind of clearing things. I'm doing some death cleansing. Is a term that came up in the newspaper about clearing things out.
Yeah.
Anyway, so here's what I've got.
oh, and George, may I interrupt? That
Sure.
Helen Luke piece that you sent was absolutely fantastic. I want to get to know her a little better.
Oh, good, good. I'll
Um,
send you some more stuff,
Yeah.
notes about her or something. But she used to be in Los Angeles doing therapy with a lot of clergy people
Oh,
too, as a little side. And she was you know, Robert Johnson, the fellow that wrote He, She, and We,
mm-mm.
kind of a Jungian. Anyway, she worked with him there in Los Angeles. Anyway, so
Go ahead.
with regard to original sin, you know, I'm coming at it with the perspective of, say, Buddhism. And they have something called the three poisons: ignorance, greed, and anger or aggression. They kind of relate all problems to three poisons. I don't think it's that important to kind of figure out what the origin is or what the deal is, except that it's here. You know, I think when you talked about those priests, those young priests, I think, you know, original sin to me is what's in society affecting us. It's how it's a young guy who somebody offers him some drugs and it's laced with fentanyl and the guy dies. You know, original sin is in the media. It's what's being touted as values, you know, about earn as much money as you can, get all you can get. Don't worry about, you know, go for 3 or 4 residences when 100 homeless people are in a small lot in tents. You know, so I think you all said it, you know, kindness and love. But the three poisons are there, regardless, whatever they come from, you know, ego, the way I think, you know, a lot of animals, you know, I haven't really lived that closely with infants. You know, I married and had a 7-year-old and 11-year-old stepchildren. I've got some grandkids that I've been close to, but, you know, little infants are grabbing things. They don't want you to take their things away. You know, they want to get more. There are developmental stages that people go through. And there's an egotistical phase that people could stay in for their whole life, you know, and I think part of life is trying to get beyond your own ego and realize that other people have lives too, and what can we do to help each other out, you know, and that kind of comes out with the Acts of the Apostles and the mystical body of Christ, and probably a lot of stuff. So anyway, that's one thing. With regard to Vatican II, it's, you know, Heather Cox Richardson keeps going back to the 1860s when she talks about the Civil War and the Congress back then and people trying to get around slavery and still keep discrimination going and Black people in their place. So the problem really didn't get solved, right, with the Civil War or those early things. You know, it just kind of went. So I see Vatican II, you know, when you talk about it, I think it's the same thing. You know, Vatican II will have people that didn't like it from the beginning, who don't like it now. And I think part of it, I think of Bernard Lonergan when he talks about the 3 types of conversions, religious, moral, and what's the third one? Anyway, intellectual, religious, and moral conversions. So I think of that, and I think of interchange. You know, if people just keep going to confession and say, okay, we forgive your sins, go out and say these numbers of Hail Marys, but there's no inner work, the inner work. And there's a lot of movements out there, like George Ivanovich Gurdjieff talks about what you have to do inside yourself to become a different person. And I think when you talk about the seminarians, you know, coming up, I don't think, maybe they're not tuned into the inner work. They're not tuned into the inner message that Jesus came to bring, the kind of revolutionary inner change that he taught. What else? I think a lot of may have to do with experience based. Look at what Fred Lawrence said about how he was affected by being with Frank Cofield. And I met with Brian Drolet a week ago, Tuesday, and he had the same experience. He was with Cofield. I live on a block where 2 people down the block were lesbian women who had a daughter that had a brain problem. Anyway, the short of it is, I work next to lesbians. One of my heroes in mediation was a Black woman, Maxine Baker Jackson, a wonderful person. So I think the experiential base affects how we view these things. How we view people who are gay or lesbians. My stepson Vincent is married to a woman who comes from a very Catholic family in Denver, and he's married to Lauren, but Lauren's brother came out as gay. He wanted to go into the seminary and become a priest, a very devout person. So her parents accepted it. It's just a lot of it's personal experience. A lot of it's where people get beyond labels and they get to direct experience and see human beings. They look them in the eye, and you get looked in the eye. So I think that's kind of a few of the things that have struck me as we're going along. And I think, I agree with Gary, there's going to be unofficial schisms or groups or subgroups. And I think it's just more obvious today, just like in Congress, and I think what people can judge on is the nastiness that's been added to it. The nastiness in politics and the nastiness in the church instead of disagreeing. Anyway, those are some of the observations that have been running around in my mind as I've been listening.
Wow.
Great. Shall we
Well
call it
stated.
a day?
And
Thanks.
I have to confess to jumping ship. I listen to this and I say, my God, I'm glad that that's not my basic framework that I'm living in. I'm living in a much more open, broad. I see all kinds of, there's the Pope going to Congo with the Archbishop of Canterbury and the head Scottish Presbyterian. That stuff didn't happen, right? Pre-Vatican II, I don't think. Maybe, Tom, you may know about what Roncalli did in Turkey, but I think people like that, their experience was broader. They saw other people as being spiritual and in touch with God and doing God's work. And it's happening in many different places. And that's part of my, experience. So I get, I see other sources that are moving ahead, and I think people just have to try to be genuine and kind, and I don't know. Anyway,
Moving on.
Thanks. Thank you, George.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Kurt.
Thanks.
Anybody have a prayer to finish up with?
Well, first, there's a new balloon coming over Alaska.
There is.
It isn't
There is
Chinese,
no-
is it?
There's a new balloon. There's a new balloon.
Anybody know the origin of it?
Well,
China.
yeah,
I,
don't
I,
know.
I just think that maybe we should close asking God to bless and console, and asking others to open up their hearts and souls to our brothers and sisters in Syria and Turkey who've
Oh,
suffered what
yes.
appear to be incredible suffering,
Yeah.
and that in some way they'll find some relief and some hope for the future.
That earthquake,
this.
George.
We
Amen.
ask this in Jesus' name.
Amen.
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 I agree. Amen.
Thank you.
Goodbye, brothers.
So
And
Bye.
Go. Thank
Frank, I have a similar thing on my head as you do.
Oh, yeah. Well,
It's-
mine's a little forward, George. I call it my Gorbachev
Yeah,
imprint.
That's right. It's not leftover ashes from Ash Wednesday.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Oh,
I have the
please
same
finish.
treatment.
Hasta luego.
Bye-bye, Neil.
Okay.
Hasta luego.
Thank you.